The client check-in process is the biggest portion of coaching, in my opinion, in regards to pulling the most out of an athlete. And I say this because this is the place where all feedback starts. It's where you teach the client how to objectively track things. It's where you teach the client how to objectively communicate with you. And it's how and the way a client does that for you is going to affect your decision-making as a coach. So we're going to go over the client check-in process today and just understand the role of a competitor with check-ins. What is their role within this process and why is that their role? And then just some things around the expectations of communication and metric tracking in order to map out what does the client need to do successfully in order to instigate the communication process that starts a check-in in order to allow you to make better objective decisions. And then we can go into later videos of what does that communication dynamic from you back to the client need to look like, where we'll kind of dive into the communication skills of a coach that need to be present in order to foster a client's development over the long haul. But to start, we're going to start with the initial piece, the client checking in with the coach. Now, there's three big expectations I think just need to be set as like standard ground rules with clients in order to lead clients into being able to win shows, win pro cards, compete at the Olympia one day, depending on the level that they're going to be competing at. And the level at which they execute these things is going to start to feed into how high their glass ceiling is for progress. So the first one's going to be submitting check-ins on time. This is huge for allowing the coach to have the time to review the check-ins for the day, be able to get to everyone that's submitting them on time, and also respond to you in a timely manner. Part of the timeliness of check-ins is you submitting them on time. Now, we understand there's going to be off weeks every once in a while where, things are going to happen and then they're going to come a bit later. But across the majority of the coaching process, that should be on time and it should be submitted on part 2 on your actual check-in day. If you're moving your check-in day like throughout various portions of the week, you might be sending it on a day that your coach is not actually doing check-ins, which is important to communicate from the very get-go is, what is your assigned check-in day, and understand that and make sure that you get that done. In prep, a lot of times you'll have 2 check-in days like Monday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Friday, or whatever that dynamic for that coach is. And so that's really important to understand that not only is it on time, but it's on the right check-in day so that you can get a timely response back from the coach. Now, the cherry on top to the first 2 is submitting them early in the morning. If you're doing your check-ins, you're taking fasted check-in photos first thing when you wake up. So you should be able to upload those and get that check-in information across pretty early. What this allows us to do is not only are you hitting point 1 where you're submitting check-ins on time, but it's also going to allow for the best timeliness and response for yourself, because it's going to put your check-in at the first portion of your coach's list for that day's worth of check-ins for the coach. So if you want to execute at a really high level as a client, getting that check-in early in the morning right after you submit photos is a really good thing to set as a standard for yourself. One way a lot of my clients work around this is they fill out the majority of their metric tracker for the week, the days before, the night before, and then they just plug in the last days of data on that morning, so upload the photos and send that check-in, and they're always the first ones in. And it's honestly motivating for me seeing like almost who's going to be the first check-in in for the day and then going through that process. So obviously there's going to be conditions around time change and time zones depending on who you're coaching with. That should be kind of set out from the very beginning of an expectation, but that's going to be like the big key components of starting the check-in process. Now, everyone's check-in form looks a little bit different. I did put the main metrics that I believe need to be very clearly tracked, very clearly communicated in order for the coach to receive information that leads into more of an objective decision. So obviously the first one's going to be weight trends. Getting not only the weight for your check-in day, but weight trends across the week allows us to see if weight's fluctuating up and down through the week, if maybe fatigue's getting high at one portion in the week compared to another. Also allows us to create better comparisons for different portions of the week. I have some clients who, when they do their check-ins during prep, maybe Monday, Thursday, their Monday weigh-in is 2 or 3 pounds higher than their Thursday weigh-in. And so from check-in to check-in, I'm actually comparing the Monday weigh-in to the previous Monday weigh-in and the Thursday weigh-in to the previous Thursday weigh-in. So this is where the weight trend can be really important. Obviously, health metrics are going to be huge. This is going to be very important for making sure you manage your health throughout the longevity of your bodybuilding career. And a coach can't help you manage that if they don't know what your health metrics are. So making sure you track those and uploading those every week so they can see the trend line of data over time. Now, digestion metrics, sleep metrics, and nutrition adherence, 3, 4, and 5, in my opinion, kind of all go together. And the reason I group these together is they can all affect each other in different ways. So if you're having, poor digestion, this could be a product of nutrition adherence not being very good, or even if nutrition adherence is high, it could lead to you not being able to follow the meal plan because you're just so bloated or having GI issues. But it could also be affecting your sleep. Just as if you're not prioritizing your sleep and you're getting very minimal amounts, this can also lead to cravings that drive issues with adherence, but also digestive issues from the lack of sleep. So those three together, I do kind of group into a combination. Those need to be very clearly tracked and communicated. For digestion metrics, I do like some subjective reporting in a text or however they communicate, like open-ended format, but I do use a Bristol stool chart for that as well. Sleep metrics is going to be both sleep quality and how well they wake up alongside how long they're actually sleeping. If you want to get really nitty gritty with someone who struggles in prioritizing it, I do like reporting of the sleep schedule. So like what time they go to bed, what time do they wake up, how consistent is that? And that can kind of start to dive into better habits around sleep. And then nutrition adherence can be just macro reporting or just reporting meals off plan, depending on the nutrition structure of the athlete. Now, training performance and training videos obviously are going to go hand in hand. Training performance reporting varies largely from athlete to athlete. The more advanced athletes won't be, submitting a full logbook each week. They're more just going to be communicating the trend of training over time. And that's where a large percentage of athletes will land, is kind of how are the sessions trending as a whole. If there's one that needs to be flagged or a couple movements that needs to be flagged, that needs to be brought up within the check-in process. But training video consistency is huge. You see a lot of clients in the beginning do training videos fairly well, and then it kind of starts to taper off as you move through the process. While that's understandable because you know the expectations from an execution standpoint, it is good to have a second eye and checking yourself throughout different various portions of the process. So at least 3 training videos a week I see as like a pretty good metric past those initial weeks, just to make sure you're getting that second eye on everything. Now, I set up its training videos as its own slide because I don't think there can be enough emphasis on this being submitted weekly. Training is the core stimulus for hypertrophy. If you don't want to do everything you can to optimize how well you train, whether it be needing more effort within sets, improving your actual ability to execute, or whatever may be underpinning your lack of progress, I don't understand why you wouldn't send training videos to the person that you're paying for feedback and improving your process. So there's a couple of things you need to ensure as a client in order to make sure that a coach can give you feedback appropriately, because obviously not being in person, training videos are going to be heavily relied on and need to be done well in order to get accurate feedback. So the first one is just make sure all body parts that are being trained are visibly being able to be seen. The worst thing that can ever happen is like this back angle on the leg press, like straight from the back or the 45 degrees from the rear. It's just so hard to get the full information you need from an actual leg press. It's just a prime example of a reason that you, or a single, as a prime example of a single video that might just not cut it. And so while that angle could be used for a couple things within a leg press, this kind of brings up about one of the next points, in that sometimes sending 2 videos for the same movement is needed for full feedback. This is largely going to be compound patterns. So an example of this would be squatting. Really like seeing a side view and a rear profile of an actual squat pattern. Let's say if it's like a free bar. And this really allows us to get a full breakdown of the squat pattern. Even better is front, side, rear, but you can operate with side and rear on most squat patterns, depending on how bad the squatting is. But this just proves the point that some movements are going to need more than one angle, and making sure you get clear footage of these reps. The clear footage of the reps is huge. It's pretty easy to just go to Amazon and buy a tripod. Training partners are great, but a lot of times they're just like shaking while they're trying to record the video, or they're flipping it from vertical into horizontal, and then you're just missing reps. And so it can be kind of messy. So just get a tripod. It's easy to set up. You just carry it with you just for the movements that you want to film. And you just have to record the top sets, because we want to see the high effort sets and where you're starting to break down. And that's going to be the other part, is you don't want to just get the first few reps of the set. You want to get the entirety of the set, so we can see how the reps hold and or break down throughout the entirety of the set. Finally, when you submit those videos, it's good to give feedback on how well you connect with these for the target tissues. It can help us understand like what you're cueing or what you're thinking about while you're performing the movement, and decide whether that movement is a good pattern for you to have in the program. So it's important to add that when you submit those, so that they can give you the best feedback from a training videos perspective as possible. Now, adherence to the plan. This is a huge part of the check-in process that I feel is undervalued, because this is the linchpin of the coach's logic that's supposed to be sequentially attaching each other week to week for each check-in, being able to be seen out. The less we actually adhere to the plan, the less we're actually honoring the logic of the coach and actually seeing out the logic of the coach in action. So simple, just follow the plan as written. This doesn't mean that we can't talk about plan setups to optimize adherence, whether that be nutritionally, you just do better on macros versus meal plan, or training wise, there's some movement patterns that don't fit, and so you have to make some swaps, or maybe your schedule is not allowing for the training split that you used to run. There's ways to make sure adherence happens. It just takes communication. And if you aren't following the plan, communicating why that might not be happening. This also goes into kind of stepping in on your own and making changes, because again, you're undermining the coach's logic that may be present in wanting to see what happens over a 3, 4, 5, 6 week time period. And by making those changes, you could be derailing what this coach is expecting or looking for with the way the plan is set up. So don't make unilateral decisions. Make sure that you communicate with the coach if something is going wrong. And it should be a pretty easy, quick fix or change in order to manage it, and then move on with the plan that's mapped out. And largely this is because coaches have specific reasons for portions of the plan. If you want to learn about something on the plan, it's easy to ask a question around, why do we have this on this day? Or understanding more the logic that's applied by the coach to your process. It's fine to ask those questions. It's just more about making sure you don't undermine the coach's ability to write plans and not make unilateral decisions. And I'll put that as the last point on the other slide to string into this one around very goal-oriented questions and ownership of your process. And this is in order to make you a better athlete. The better questions we ask, the ones that are geared either A, the ones that should always either A, be goal-oriented focus in mind, or B, enhance adherence to the plan. These are gonna be the two key components of asking questions that you should have as a client. If we look at the questions we write out for the coach and we can't clearly define, if we look at the questions we have for a coach and we can't clearly see that the answers to these questions make me a better athlete or allow me to adhere better to the plan, then it might be time to ask like where this question is coming from and make sure the coach is good with answering questions like this. A lot of coaches run a teaching process along their coaching where it's not an issue to have questions like this, but it should always be very goal-oriented and focused towards your athlete process in order to separate coaching and mentoring, which in my opinion should be two separate things. Now, the ownership in your process is huge for making sure that the coach doesn't care more about your process than you do. This is going to be taking full ownership of your actions within check-in process, understanding that if things that are truly uncontrollable prevent you from executing, communicating the uncontrollable nature of that, but also being prepared ahead of time in order to mitigate that possibly happening. And so that ownership of you preparing for peak performance is going to be huge, because making sure that you achieve the result that you want requires mutual commitment between coach and client, and truly wanting to see this process reach the outcome that you guys had both set out forth in the beginning of the coaching process. And a lot of that starts with your buy-in into the plan and showing the coach that you place full trust in them, because it's honestly motivating for us to see someone work hard towards a goal and fully adhere and ask, good questions around their process. It motivates us to be like super excited for their journey towards the stage or towards the pro card or whatever that end goal for them may be. And then finally, as a client, expectations and potential are huge for managing the coach to client relationship. And largely this is going to be dependent on how much effort and time you can put into your process, because you create your own potential. This comes down to like work ethic. How disciplined are you with your day-to-day process? How well do you manage your time? Do you need help with time management? And do you need to look at better scheduling in order to be the type of athlete that you want to be? Potentially you're taking on responsibilities that don't lead to your end goal, and we need to drop those responsibilities in order to reach that end goal. And then it's about prioritization of what's the most important to you. Obviously, if bodybuilding is not your job is going to take priority over the bodybuilding process, and you need to be able to pay your bills. Understand that comes with potentially sacrifice on the bodybuilding side, depending on the job that you have. Now, that's just one example. There's a lot of different priorities people could have, but we need to relegate expectations of how much process you make on the body. We need to relegate expectations of how much progress you make on the bodybuilding side relative to how much you prioritize that. If it's pretty far down the totem pole, you can't expect to be winning pro shows and going to the Olympia if it's fourth or fifth on your totem pole. And then this leads into that expectation management relative to the time you've invested to your journey. And in summary, the reason I even have this lecture is I truly believe that the lowest hanging fruit for making the most out of an athlete's process is getting the most out of the check-in process. It builds the communication dynamic between coach and client. It allows the coach to make objective decisions that lead to better outcomes, and it develops the athlete quicker in fully understanding why these decisions are made and learning new skills along the way. And a large part of that check-in process is just strictly applying discipline in order to tick your boxes every week. And I love this quote by Brian Tracy talking about your ability to discipline yourself for any goal set and working towards them every day will guarantee more about your success than anything else. And I think that's so true. It's like just adding to the piggy bank, just nickels and dimes every single day. We end up adding to a lot over time. And this is where that discipline and urgency with executing on the day-to-day, while patience in reaching the long-term goal truly comes to fruition. And finally, to finish this out, the check-in process breeds a higher level of effort, not only from the athlete, but from the coach, because it's honestly motivating as a coach to see someone so bought into their process that they execute at such a high level. And a high level of effort on both ends of the spectrum is how shows are won and how you raise your glass ceiling of progress as an athlete.